This is the Manga Xanadu Manga Dome podcast. I am your host, Laurie Henderson. Join me on this journey into the world of manga, where a river of reviews flow through caverns of commentary down into the latest news. Welcome to the Manga Dome. The 2012 Eisner nominations. Last week, the Eisner Committee announced their nominations for the Eisners, comics version of the Oscars. While manga has been nominated in other categories, it is mostly confined to the Best U.S. Edition of International Material Asia category. This year, 4 titles, all from different publishers, were nominated, and surprisingly, I've read most of them. Barbara from Digital Manga Publishing, 20th Century Boys from Viz Media, Nonamba from Drawn and Quarterly, and Therme Roma from Yen Press. Barbara was the first from-scratch Kickstarter title DMP did. It was written by Osamu Tezuka and is for mature audiences. It is about a writer, Yosuke Mikura, who meets a muse, Barbara, and becomes obsessed with her. It is a wild trip through the mind of a man who is either a genius or mad. It was an excellent book, but requires a lot of thinking and analysis to really get the messages Tezuka put into it. It is not a light read. 20th Century Boys is by Naoki Urasawa and published by Viz Media. Both Urasawa and 20th Century Boys have been nominated before, with 20th Century Boys winning an Eisner in 2011. I'm not really sure why this title is being nominated again. Not because it won before, but because I thought the last half of the series was more of a train wreck. It was a serious disappointment to me from the promise of the beginning. I still have to read the last volume of 21st Century Boys, which is technically the end of 20th Century Boys, but I'm not so sure it can be saved by one volume. Therme Roma is by Mari Yamazaki and published by Yen Press. It is a comedy series with the absurd story of an ancient Roman who can travel forward in time to modern Japan to see the bath culture there and bring back ideas he finds to Rome. I honestly didn't think this premise could work for more than 1 or 2 chapters, but Yamazaki was able to keep it fresh and fun. I loved it and considered it one of the best titles I read in 2012. I didn't get to read Nonaba, though it does sound interesting. It was written by Shigeru Mizuki and published by Drawn and Quarterly. Mizuki is considered the forefather of yokai manga, as his work Gegege no Kintaro helped bring yokai back to the attention of modern audiences. Nonamba is a semi-biographical work about Mizuki's childhood and growing up with his grandmother, the person who told him all about yokai. I'd like to pick this up at some point, since I do love yokai so much. While not a manga, I also really enjoyed Kitty and Dino, a children's book published by Yen Press and nominated in the Best Publication for Early Readers by Sarah Richard. It is a beautifully drawn story of a cat and the newest member of the family, a baby Tyrannosaurus Rex. It is the cutest story I've read in a long time, and it features a cat, so of course I'm going to love it. My hopes for a winner go to Therme Roma, but Barbara will probably win. It's by Tezuka, and it's weirdly intellectual, which is just the sort of titles that these awards tend to go to. I want Kitty and Dino to win just because it's so cute. The Eisner Awards will be held Friday, July 19th at Comic-Con International at San Diego, aka San Diego Comic-Con. My Little Pony, Friendship is Manga. Some people may call this new manga in Japan My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, but I would call it a license to print money. Publisher Shogakukan has announced that it will be publishing a manga based on the popular cartoon series that has just started airing in Japan. It will run in Puchigumi, a children's manga magazine that features other franchises such as Barbie, Tamagotchi, and Stitch of Disney fame. Viz Media, which is partially owned by Shogakukan, would be insane not to license this once some chapters are under its belt. The My Little Pony Friendship is Magic comic book has been selling better than many superhero comic titles and is showing no signs of slowing down. It would be a true all-ages title, attracting both young and old, boys and girls. I really hope Hasbro is smart enough to let Viz do this too. Pony fans and bronies just can't get enough stories about the main 6. It would be such a win-win. Manga Movable Feast. Themes in the manga of Kaori Yuki. This month's Manga Movable Feast features the works of Kaori Yuki. She became a manga artist in 1987 and has created several titles of various length, mostly in the gothic horror fantasy genre. Here in the U.S., only 5 of her titles have been released: Angel Sanctuary, The Kane Saga, Godchild, Fairy Cube, and Grand Guignol Orchestra. I first discovered Yuki's work through Shoujo Beat, Viz Media's now defunct shoujo magazine. Her series, Godchild, was one of the original titles that the magazine started with. I was initially interested in reading it since it was described as a sort of murder mystery involving fairy tales, and once I started reading, it became one of the reasons for me to continue reading the magazine. And once I was hooked on Godchild, I then had to find more of her titles. Angel Sanctuary had already been completely released, and at 20 volumes, it seemed to be a daunting prospect. I picked up the first 5 volumes, but length and cost kept me from pursuing it at the time. Lucky for me, Viz released the Kane Saga, the prequel to Godchild, Fairy Cube, and finally Grand Guignol Orchestra, all of which were much shorter and much more readily accessible. After reading all of these titles, I started to notice some themes in Yuki's manga that ran through some, if not all of her titles. It's these recurring themes that I'd like to discuss. The first theme that runs through both Angel Sanctuary and the Kane Saga and Godchild is the taboo of incest. Setsuna, the protagonist of Angel Sanctuary, is consumed by a desire for his sister Sarah. This unnatural lust is what drives the first couple of volumes, and it's revealed that it is part of the punishment for the angel Alexiel, whom Setsuna is a reincarnation of. In every reincarnation, Alexiel is doomed to a doomed life, and this time around, the incestual desire is Setsuna's curse. The theme of incest as a curse continues in the Kane Saga and Godchild. As the protagonist of that series, Kane Harsgraves is the child of an incestuous relationship between his father Alexis and his father's older sister Augusta. Kane is called a cursed child, marked by his golden eyes, and just before his presumed death, Alexis curses Kane to a miserable and lonely life. Both Setsuna and Kane have this taboo thrust upon them through no fault of their own, but it becomes a burden they must overcome on their own in order for them to find their own happiness. Connected to the taboo of incest, but not exclusively, is the act of abuse. The protagonists in Angel Sanctuary, the Kane Saga and Godchild, and Fairy Cube have to endure abuse from their parents. Setsuna is beaten by his mother, who seems to sense his incestual desires and tries to keep brother and sister apart. Kane is also beaten by his father and his father's wife, who knew about the incestual relationship and takes it out on Kane. Kane's abuse, though, goes beyond physical to the emotional as well. Alexis seems to enjoy torturing Kane, as well as his half-brother Jezebel Disraeli. Alexis's torture of Jezebel was really disturbing, especially if you're an animal lover like me. Ian Harumi and his childhood friend Rin Ishinagi both have their abuses to endure. Rin is a battered child by her mother who drinks too much and lashes out at her daughter because of her husband's philandering ways. Ian's father badly burns the winged birthmark on Ian's back due to his irrational fear that he will fly away like his wife, Ian's mother, did. Cordy, Lucille's sister in the Grand Guignol Orchestra, was berated by her mother, the Queen, but she didn't suffer a lot of the abuses that get piled on several of Yuki's other characters. Lucille and Cordy are actually probably the least messed up of all of the protagonists we've seen so far. Still, being the protagonist in a Kaori Yuki manga can be a life-threatening prospect. It's a good thing all of her protagonists are so strong-willed. No matter what Yuki throws at her heroes, they always persevere no matter how daunting or hopeless the situation may seem. Setsuna takes on a near-impossible quest to save Sarah from the underworld. With little time and no real friends to help, Setsuna takes up the task because she is the most important thing in the world to him. Lucille of the Grand Guignol Orchestra is on a quest to save his sister as well, as he searches the world for the Black Oratorio, the only book said to hold the secret to ending the original Queen's curse. Kane takes up a similarly impossible task of single-handedly taking down the organization Delilah, which was taken over by his father. Ian is determined to save Rin from the fairy changeling Tokage, who has taken over his body. He doesn't care what he has to sacrifice to get back everything and everyone he lost to Tokage's machinations. The protagonists all have people that help them in their journey, but you can't always trust these people called friends. They all have their own agendas, and inevitably, one betrays the protagonist. Both Kane and Lucille is betrayed by people they trusted. But in Yuki's world, the door swings both ways. Setsuna's guide through the underworld is Yue, a human who initially hates him for killing him, can't really blame him for that, but comes to be Setsuna's friend. Lisanat, a group of 4 leaders in the Grand Guignol Orchestra, appears to be villains of the story, but as Lucille faces them, the truth is revealed. While their methods weren't the best, their intentions were good. One of the things that draws me back to Kaori Yuki's titles is her use of Western mythologies in her stories. Angel Sanctuary is pretty obvious, as it uses the concept of angels and devils, heaven and hell, and many of the names of the angels from the Bible. Kane Saga and Godchild uses fairy tales as a basis for the murder mysteries at the beginning of the series. She also uses a tarot, using the card names as aliases for members of Delilah. Grand Guion Orchestra also has a bit of a fairy tale feel with the story of how the Guion virus started. Fairy Cube is one of the few manga you'll find that focuses on Celtic mythology and the Seelie and Unseelie court. Camelot Garden, a short story that was used to fill the end of the last volume of Grand Guion Orchestra, works off the tale of King Arthur and the poem The Lady of Shalott, written by English poet Lord Alfred Tennyson. She also referenced Shakespeare in Kane Saga. Kaori Yuki's work tends to polarize readers. It seems it's either you love her work or you hate it. I find myself more on the love side. I enjoyed Kane Saga and Godchild despite my initial misgivings. I really enjoyed Grand Guion Orchestra. It didn't have the themes of incest and very little abuse. I want to go back and revisit Angel Sanctuary. Now that I've slogged through the first few angst-ridden volumes, I'd like to finally get to the meat of the story. But that one's on a back burner. I would also really like to see more Kaori Yuki manga licensed. Her one-volume story, Bloodhound, about a teenager investigating a group of vampires working at a host club, sounds like a lot of fun. I'd also like to read her more current title, Ludwig Revolution, which takes on fairy tales more directly. If you haven't read any of Kaori Yuki's work, I'd suggest starting with Godchild or Grand Guion Orchestra. They are fairly short, at 5 and 8 volumes respectively, and don't need a lot of investment to get into. They are also a good contrast between angsty drama and more action. If you like them, then move on to Kane Saga and Fairy Cube. If not, you don't know what you're missing. All of the titles discussed here are available in both print and digitally on the Viz Manga app and website. Thank you for listening to the Manga Xanadu Manga Dome podcast. You can find links to the stories and books discussed here in the show notes at manga.jadedragononline.com. You can email me with any questions at xanadu@jadedragononline.com or leave a comment on this post. Rate me on YouTube and follow me on Twitter at Manga Xanadu, all one word. Until next time, farewell from the Manga Dome.